Everything school should have taught you in one place. With a property portfolio of over 17 million and an accountancy firm of over 16,000 clients, as well as being an accountant to some of the wealthiest people in Australia, Jeremy Iannuzzelli will be sharing his lessons on everything school should have taught you so you can build the life you want.
Thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of What School Should Have Taught You. And I have the biggest pleasure actually today to bring on board a gentleman who I look up to, and I look at him as a mentor in this space. And I've had the pleasure of speaking at many of his events, and there's not a lot of people like him out there that have created a community and a network, so much so that he's actually called his organization the Property Development Network. So I'm bringing on board today the founder, Rob Flux. Rob, how are we going?
Jeremy, I am fantastic, mate. How are you?
Very well, mate. So you actually run we've got a business, obviously, of course, but run a fantastic network called the Property Development Network. Do you want to just share a little bit about the Property Development Network and a little bit about you as well? And I've had the luxury of attending many of your in-person seminars all around the country where you do some really great things and you've really taught some people to build some, magical developments that I'm sure many of our listeners have either maybe bought or even living in today. But do you want to share a little bit about yourself and the Property Development Network?
Yeah, look, for myself, I've been in the property game for a lot more years than I can count. Bought my first house at 18, first investment property at 21, and owned my first house outright at 24. 20 years of the old traditional buy and hold approach. And I guess before converting over to, the property development side of things, I'm about 17 years into that. So you guys can do the math. I don't want to admit my age, but I think you can work it out. And along the way, as I was trying to go through the journey, I spent about 120K on my education trying to learn this property development gig. And I found at the end of it, I was very motivated and inspired, but I still didn't really know what to do because the educators out there were more, spruikers per se. And so I got 5 mates around my kitchen table. I read a book, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, and it talked about the power of the mastermind. We created a mastermind experience around that kitchen table, just trying to help each other's projects move forward. And as we started to get success, then a mate would invite a mate, they would invite another mate. And all of a sudden I ran a public networking group, which started all the way back in August of 2012. So we are now fast approaching 13 years of age. We're just shy of 32,000 people in our community, the largest property networking group in the country. And we help small scale developers, novice developers, people not quite sure what they do, experienced developers that want to take their business to the next level. We create a melting pot for them to actually move their projects forward.
And I've been lucky enough to be helping a large number of your members over many years who have met each other at your network events and students of your course, and they've got together and they've gone ahead and built some beautiful things and made lots of money, but learnt lots of lessons along the way. So your events aren't just all about the services, but it also is creating a community for people to thrive and for people to learn from one another as well. Without further ado, I want to get straight in today and ask all the hard questions, not to put you on the spot, but you've got years and years of knowledge. You've just shared with us the amount of time that you've spent in the property space. But Rob, the first thing I hear as an accountant, as a professional in this space is, I want to become a full-time developer. What are some of the things that we should be thinking about, internally, but also financially and emotionally, physically? What are some of the things that we need to be thinking out before we commence or wanting to commence our property development journey?
The first thing I'd say is it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. You can absolutely get rich from it, but you need to put, the appropriate time and effort into learning the process. It's like learning a new career, and if you put the effort in, then there's heaps of reward that can come at the end of it. But you need to actually, do the apprenticeship and actually put the effort in to learn that up front. That's probably the biggest thing. We see lots of people come in thinking they're going to be a millionaire in 3 or 4 months' time, and we have to, slowly reset their expectations to say, look, it's possible to make that sort of money, but not in that sort of timeline. And so Bill Gates famously said, we tend to overestimate what we can do in 12 months and underestimate what we can do in 10 years. Well, I've, modified that. And I think that in 5 years, the majority of us, if we put a good plan in place, can be very fast approaching financial freedom. And for many of us, actually getting there.
Now, you mentioned there's an apprenticeship that you need to take, in the sense that, you need to do your time. Where's a good starting point, or what should people be thinking about as a starting point for getting the runs on the board? Because it's not just we wake up out of bed, I'm going to become a property developer, I'm going to do someone's course for 3-4 weeks or a month or two, and bang, I'm going to start doing townhouses. Where's a good starting point to commence that apprenticeship to become a developer?
The first thing I'd say is don't do a course day one. Right now, I'm not saying don't do courses. I'm saying don't do it day one. What you want to do is you want to try and work out what development strategy is appropriate for you, and then pick the correct course for that, because there's plenty of courses out there and they're all going to be great. But if they end up not solving the problem that you want to do, then they're not going to be of great value to you. So spend the time to actually get to know what development strategy you think fits for you. Then go find the right course that actually fits after that. So easy to get sucked in by a slick salesman, mate.
I want to take what the development strategy, you just made a comment, because a lot of people ask me, well, Jeremy, what is a development strategy? And people think that you've got to build units. That's a development. You've got to build skyscrapers. What are some various, smaller development strategies that people can look at as an initial starting point, just to kind of get the framework again?
Yeah, thank you. I guess development in its purest sense is just the ability to force value onto the property through your own knowledge and sweat equity. So anything from a renovation is, I guess, a form of development, all the way through to, I guess, commercial, industrial, residential, doing a knockdown rebuild, doing a 1 into 2 land subdivision, duplexes, townhouses, apartments and the like. So it's all development, and every single one of them make money. And that's the tricky part, because they're all bright, shiny objects, but they only make money if you get very, very good at it. So when you choose the one, then lock in on that one and get, narrow that down. Now I have, some guiding principles for people trying to start with regards to which ones are the ones that have the most likelihood of success. Firstly, commercial will make huge amounts of money, but there's not as many ultimate buyers to actually take that on. 27 million people need a roof over their head, but only 2.5 million businesses need a roof over their head. And about 80% of those businesses work from home anyway, so they're probably living in the same roof that you'd build a residential house on. So for me, starting in residential makes a lot of sense, and commercial might be something that you graduate to in many, many years. But start with, where the demand is, and if you know where the demand is, that's really where the solutions are. And then once you've picked a residential strategy, then my guidance from there is to say, find one where you can start small, learn the skills, and then step up a deal size and do the exact same thing again. So if I can do that, then I'm going to get lessons out of the first project that I can directly apply to the second project. So the things I did right, the things that I did wrong. So I might build 2 of something the first time, 4 of something the next time, then 6 of something the time after that. And so I can ramp up my deal size as my experience grows.
Now, one of the big things that I always hear is capital constraints, and, how much money do I actually need? And I think that comes back down to the development strategy that you spoke about. And it's great that you said that a development doesn't necessarily have to be, a 1 into 3 or a duplex. It can start off as little as a renovation. And it's a really good starting point to build, some good people around you, whether it's trades or other professionals. Coming back to the way I started, which was through renovations, but it'd be really good to maybe share with people, you've been in the industry for such a long time. What was your starting point? When did that light bulb moment come for you to say, I've done my 20 years of buying and holding, now I want to start focusing on developing? What was your first deal, Rob?
Look, what I did and what I tell people to do is very, very different. I want to be very clear. I basically put all my chips in the center very first go, and I did an 8 townhouse project. Took 2 existing houses, carved them up, and then put 6 new dwellings at the back, so 8 in total. I made $1 million profit out of that project. I went big very early, but the lesson I got from that is I went too big too early. That project should have taken me a lot less time than it did. So it took me 4 years to run when it should have really only taken me 2. I left lots of money on the table. Even though I made $1 million, I probably left about $300,000 on the table because I didn't know what I was doing and I wasn't very efficient and effective. But if I had have started with a duplex, learnt the skills, reapplied that and done a 4-pack, learnt those skills and reapplied that, and then did the 8-pack then, I would have kept that extra 300 grand. I probably would have done the project in half the time, in 2 years, and I probably would have squeezed those other 2 deals in the other 2 years. So I would have actually made more money overall if I had have, not listened to my ego and actually looked at, what are the skills that I need to learn, and take the slow and steady approach.
So you don't necessarily need to make, and again, for everybody that's listening, I think that's one of the big things that we need to take away. Not every development, Rob, needs to be $1 million profit.
No.
So sometimes it could be worthwhile to hedge your bets or hedge your risk and take a smaller scale approach to development. You may not make as much in one deal, but it allows you to potentially have multiple deals going on at the same time, or multiple deals being done over the same duration of time, and that eventually may get you into the same amount of money that you would make, if not maybe more, from trying to do one big deal where there's a hell of a lot of risk involved in it. Over the years, Rob, who's been probably the most crucial professionals around you that have helped you not only get to where you are as a successful business owner and teaching so many people about the development space, but who's been the really crucial people around you to help you become a very successful developer?
Look, I've had many mentors along the way, some of which have done 1,000-lot land subdivisions with house and land packages on those, done multi-million-dollar apartment complexes, and the like. Those people tend to not want to, put themselves in the public light. But as big as those guys are, the people that I've got the most amount of learning from, as strange as it's going to sound, is the community that we've built, the Property Developer Network, because they've got a breadth of experience and exposure to problems that I've never actually had. I get to see what that problem is. I get to, through that masterminding process that we do at the events, I get to see people helping each other solve that problem. And then next month, I get to see whether or not that problem actually worked. So I get this exposure to problems that I've never had, and solutions that I now know either work or don't work. So my mental ability and my real world ability are not aligned, because that masterminding process has given me exposure to all those additional problems I'd never have. And if you do that, week after week for 13 years straight, it's amazing how many different deals you actually get exposed to and the knowledge that comes from that.
So again, everyone listening, moral is you've got to surround yourself with people that are on that same path or same journey with you, and almost engross yourself into this, because property developing, Rob, is it a light that you kind of turn on and off, or is it something you just got to absolutely dial yourself in?
Look, I think it's one of those things that you just get a passion for. Once you've got that burning fire, you tend to not stop. You see where you want to go, and that's your singular focus. But to turn it on and off, I think it actually needs momentum. Property development needs momentum. When you put energy in, you don't get an instant outcome. So it's like a snowball. You kind of need the snowball to build and get a flywheel effect happening. But once it's got that momentum, it's very, very hard to stop.
Now, one big question I always get, and it's a struggle, because I think you have to have done a lot of developing in the past, or you got lots of war stories. But lots of clients will come to me because they'll have that beer at someone's house or that barbecue, and they'll talk about, yep, let's get together and let's do a duplex together. What's your recommendations? And again, let's set the scene. You're a novice, investor. You've got maybe 1 or 2 properties. You want to go down the path of doing a property development. A lot of people talk about doing joint ventures together. Is that something you would recommend early on, or someone who's probably got a little bit more experience and done a couple and had a couple of developments under their belt already?
Well, I'm never allowed to recommend. I can't do those things, but I can go pros and cons. Look, a joint venture is a great way to actually join forces, so long as the person you're joint venturing with is complementary to, where you're weak, they're strong, and where they're weak, you're strong. If you can do that, then a joint venture has a great opportunity. But equally, shadowing somebody else's deal, learning to do this, through formal education, getting yourself a mentor in some description who's doing the things that you're wanting to do, hanging around our community, watching our real deals. We have members of our community presenting deals all the time, watching those deals and learning. They're all I guess, ways to get there. There's many, many ways. The key thing is to know where you want to go. Because if you don't know where you want to go, then every bus takes you there. So being very clear on what is my end goal, and then go, well, what are the steps I need to do today to move me towards that? That's probably the missing element for most people. They don't know what their development strategy is. They don't know what their pathway is to start small and step up. If they can get that right, then they can make deliberate steps to say, how do I learn that, and what are the approaches I can take?
Beautiful. And mate, I've got another question around feasibilities. I see so many people give up because they've done feasibilities on maybe 1 or 2 properties, and they've got some advice from professionals, and they said, look, it's just not enough money in it, or the accountants come in and said, you're crazy, you take contingencies into case, you might walk out break even. From your experience, and again, you might get it lucky, but how many feasibilities normally would someone do before they've found the right one and the numbers work? Is it just something that every deal's a development deal, or is there a certain thing we're looking for? But feasibility-wise,
90% of every site out there that is developable is not profitable. That's 90, which means that only 10% is profitable. And of those 10%, they don't necessarily meet your own personal circumstances. They might not be your strategy. They might not meet your cash flow. They might not meet your budget and a whole bunch of other things. So it actually takes quite a lot of deals to look at before you can actually nail it. So it's super important that you don't give up with just 1 or 2. But I'm going to say there's probably 2 key points that I'd love to say about feasibilities. Firstly, I think most people choose their area incorrectly, and so they're farming in areas with a low probability of success. And so being able to know where to farm is the most important part. And then secondly, when they are farming in that area, they need to be very good at what is actually the ingredients of a feasibility, because I think people just think it's this magic spreadsheet, and if you punch the numbers in, you get the answer. But they don't know. If it's garbage in, it's garbage out. If they don't know what the right inputs are, then they'll miss the point altogether.
So again, people that are listening, you've got to make sure that you go through unfortunately, the time and the labour involved, which you've heard, Rob, 90% of developable properties that are out there actually aren't profitable. So that means on average, there could be 9 out of every 10 feasibilities that you do, which you just walk away from. But more and more that you do, and more properties you see, the quicker you start to actually then be able to assess to say it's worthwhile and worth spending my time going through it. Now, Rob, cost is one big thing. I get this all the time, Jeremy. I want to develop property, but every time I keep spending money, it doesn't seem to go anywhere. Recommended or not? Having professionals early on, spending that money and burning a bit of capital, is it recommended, or is it something you just take the punt?
Look, no matter what your approach is, you're going to be spending money. Okay, so you can either go and pay for the experience of someone like yourself in the accounting space, and someone in the town planning space, and an architect. You can pay all those experts right up front for them to do the work, but then you don't know whether or not they've done a good job. Or you could spend the money on yourself and educate yourself, so that when you qualify a site, you only take the qualified lead to someone. And then you have a good ability to assess whether or not they've actually done a good job of that review. So the difference is whether you are delegating or abdicating. So if I'm abdicating, I don't know how to tell if you're doing a good job. But if I'm delegating, then now I can get better bandwidth, and I can give you a task and you can come back to me with the answers, and I don't have to do the effort. So I think invest in yourself first, then delegate the work. You're going to have to use those experts in the process. I'm not pretending that you're going to do it all yourself, but just take them qualified leads that have a higher probability of success. And
it's a great way to save you money. And again, if you can weed out a large portion of deals, then only moving forward, you might have something there that you're on a good wicket. Now, I want to ask another question. Again, this is a bit of a myth buster, whether it's myth or fact. This magic number that everyone throws around, I'm not going to touch it if it doesn't get an 18% return. As a developer, what are we looking for as a return? And is this magical 18%?
Is that what you said?
Oh, 18%. I just hear it all the time.
Everybody tells me 20, mate. So
there we go. So you're 20, I hear 18. So is there this magical number that we're after? Is it a myth or is it fact?
Look, it's A bit of both, and let me articulate it. The fact part is the 20% is a real number that people are actually aiming for, but the distinction is they're for specific kinds of deals. Okay, so they're for a particular deal like a townhouse type project, which might take about 2 years to run. So when you look at it from that perspective, 20% profit on cost for 2 years. When you take in the time factor of that, it's about 10% annualized. So if you're going to be doing a deal that takes less than 2 years, then you want to start to compare the percentage profit on cost for that particular project. So for example, if I'm doing a 1:2 land subdivision, that might only take me 9 months to run. If I got a 10 or a 12% return out of that, it's not the 20% that we got, but when I annualize it, if let's just say it was a 10% return in 9 months, that's 13 or 14% annualized. That's doing much better than the townhouse project. So I think when we start to do that annualized comparison, that's really the key to it. And if it's not making a minimum 10% annualized, I wouldn't be touching it.
Now, we had a property consultant on board who, does a lot of building designs and helps a lot of people, take their idea into actual theory, from theory to practice, and helps them work through all the reports and then actually build the property itself. But one of the big things, I asked him a question around time. I've bought this particular development site, Rob. Are you one of those people that advocates for, or yourself even with your own developments, doing it straight away? Or are you one of those people that will hold it and bank it and then maybe do it in 3 or 5 years' time when the market may be a little bit better? So I think the question I'm trying to ask is, are you someone who speculates on what something will be worth later on as a developer, or someone who buys it using today's numbers and then actions it ASAP?
I'm one who wants to action it straight away. But it's important to recognize that there's really 3 different kinds of investor. So you've got your passive investor who buys and holds and lets the market do the work. You've got your active investor, which is someone like myself who forces value on in very short timelines. And you've got your semi-active investor, which is someone who actually understands the uplift of the development cycle, but doesn't want to put all the effort in themselves. And so they're the people that are going to be doing the land banking. They're typically people who might joint venture with someone like me when the time is right, to say, hey, I've got this developable land, but I don't necessarily know how to run that. So they want the benefit of the uplift, but they may not necessarily be doing the work themselves. So there's the small, medium and large type approach. If you're going to be doing a land banking type exercise, the most important part is actually understanding what is going to make that site get the capital growth in the longer run. Where are people going? Why are they going there? What is the timeline anticipated to going there? What are the ingredients that activate an area that actually justify why that's actually going to go up?
Beautiful. And I think that's a key thing. And I'll come back to the activation of an area, because not many people actually understand what that means. But I want to ask one more question regarding now finance, because there's this misconception out there that to be a developer, you must have absolute pockets full of cash. Now, yes, we do need to have some level of capital required, and not all the time does it have to be full pockets of cash. But from your experience and dealing with thousands upon thousands of property developers, and everyone's circumstances are different, but when would financially be a good time to go into property development? And are huge sums of capital required for, say, smaller things?
So I'm going to answer the question, but I'm going to go the long way around, because there's some preconceived notions that a lot of people come into this environment in, that I need to dispel those myths, and then the answer will make a little bit more sense. So firstly, we've been indoctrinated on long-term residential buy and hold strategies where we're owning a property for 20 or 30 years. And so we must put down a 20% deposit. We must prove our serviceability to make the bank happy. And so this residential funding indoctrination has been, the preconceived idea we're coming in with. But in property development, we're forcing value onto the property. We're creating an uplift through that sweat equity that we're actually putting in, and our knowledge and experience. And because of that, it creates a whole bunch of opportunities that are not available if we take our residential funding approach. So firstly, there are different kinds of lenders who specialize in development lending. So commercial lenders who specialize in that, and they look at the profitability of the deal and they don't look at your serviceability. So if the deal makes sense, they will fund that. Now, in order to do that, they will want more equity in the project. Now, equity, change of terminology, equity is what in the residential world we were calling deposit before. So they changed the terminology to say equity. So typically that could be anywhere from 30% all the way up to 50%, depending upon the size, the nature, the risk of the deal, and your experience in that process, which means that cash is required. But it doesn't necessarily mean to be your cash. It could be from investors. It could be because the person that you're buying the land off of is leaving the equity of the land in. Maybe they're staying in the deal themselves. There's creative acquisition models where we can create what is called soft equity, where we can get a development approval that adds value to the property, where we don't actually have to come up with hard cash. So there's lots of different models, but effectively 7 different ways that you can profit from a project when you've got little to no money of your own, just by learning how to control the property rather than owning it, and then at the right time flipping that into commercial construction process.
And I think that's one of the big things that you've got to learn, again, listening to these golden nuggets that Rob's giving. Property developing is a business, and you've got to provide a solution to a problem, which could be housing, and understanding finance. And that's where you've got to always sometimes think outside the box. There aren't just one size fits all approach. You do have, as Rob mentioned, private lenders that you can bring on board. You can keep the person that you're buying the property from in the deal. Rob mentioned soft equity approach, which I love, and I've done that and executed myself. Had a property, got the rezoning happened, got the plans being done. I was able to get a loan based upon a gross realised valuation of the property. Essentially, the deal when it was completed and when it could be sold was going to be far substantially more than what my purchase price and build cost was, and therefore I got full funding from the bank. So it's having various different approaches and being able to approach one situation and providing, say, several different solutions, as Rob mentioned. Rob, I want to ask one more question, because we're just on a really good roll here with, a lot of fundamentals that people need to hear. I want to take a very diplomatic approach when I ask this particular question, because it is something that I see far too often. Rob, as a experienced property developer, family, I see it time and time again. Lots of clients, they will, parents pass away for argument's sake, and they're getting the property for nothing because the parents passed away and the property's value is worth $3 million, and it's cost them nothing to achieve it, and they know they can build a duplex on it and sell it for $5 million for argument's sake, or $4 million. In a particular situation like that, what would you be recommending or discussing with that particular person based upon, guys, yes, you are making money, but are you making real money, or are you just spending money for someone to buy that particular property? Are you kind of following with the example I'm giving?
I think so. So they've inherited a property and I guess it was purchased at a different point in time.
Yep.
There might be some equity already in the property. There's the potential that they could cash in today and they could get that, I guess, capital gains tax free because they've got a small period after passing where they can actually do that.
That's it.
Or they could take on the process themselves and do the development itself.
That's it.
So the advice I would give is to say, just suspend belief as to how you acquired the property, and assess the deal as if you had to purchase the property in the current market. So what would that price point have been? What would the stamp duty have been? What would be the holding costs based on that? And then run a scenario that says, I'm going to do a feasibility to say, would that deal have made profit in today's market if I had to buy it today? Now, if the answer is yes, then sure, do the development, because you're going to get, I guess, the free capital uplift that mum and dad just gave you, plus you're going to get the profits from the deal. If the answer is no, then all you've done is introduce a very, very complicated process to unlock capital growth that has already been gifted to you, and you may surpass the timeline where that capital gains benefit is actually sitting there.
And that's exactly what I was after. You articulated it so well, because I'm starting to see that as generations pass, mum and dad leave a property behind, And I'm sitting with these guys saying, guys, you're actually not going to be making any money. In fact, you'll be losing money, because when you factor in all the costs of building and holding and the time that it's going to take, you're actually better off maybe putting that money in other places. And I think the same goes for people that have held investment properties, say, for arguably 5 or 10 years, and they're saying, I can now do a duplex on it. But if you actually get them to look at, well, guys, if you were to buy that property at the price it is today, and let's call it, arguably you bought it for 300 grand 10 years ago, it's now worth $1 million. If you were to buy it for $1 million, as you said, pay the stamp duty and all the other holding costs attached to it, is what
the deal makes sense.
Yeah, is what you're selling for. Are you actually making money, or are you giving a brand new, sparkly, shiny property to someone else at the expense of your own money and potentially your own profit? Is that something you often get speaking with your members who may have held properties
look, we
for
don't
longer?
get people in that exact scenario. I guess being gifted through inheritance, but we do get a lot of people who start out with an investment property, hold it for a lot of years, and then work out, hey, this thing is actually developable. What am I going to do with it? So if it fits into that magic 10% where the deal would have made sense, then the answer is yes, do it. If it's in the 90% where the deal doesn't make sense, then you've already got the benefits of your capital gains tax discount for holding that for, more than 12 months. It just makes sense to take the easy money and not overcomplicate your life with a skill that if this is going to be your one and only development ever, it's not like they're turning it into a career, then why complicate their life? Now, different if they think, hey, I do want to turn it into a career and this is a free swing because I've got it, and it's a learning opportunity. But I guess that's less, I see less of that where people see it as a learning opportunity. But even then, the deal needs to still be a deal.
Rob, best words I've heard for a very long time. The deal still needs to be a deal. And I think that's important. Again, for everybody listening, just because you can doesn't mean you should or you do. You still need to make sure that you separate yourself from the emotion and then factor in the numbers and making sure that the numbers actually translate to profit, because in the end, as developers or business owners, we're all trying to do our very best to make a dollar and make it in the most efficient way we possibly can. Rob, thank you very much for your time today. It's been brilliant that you've kind of addressed a lot of myths and facts and given a lot of really cool content of your own experiences and experiences you've generated by building a huge 32,000 community and over 17 years of developing and 37 years of investing as well. Rob, people can reach you out at the Property Developer Network Facebook page. I know you've got a website, propertydevelopernetwork.com.au. Is that correct?
It's just developernetwork.com.au. We've got YouTube channels as well. But if they come to our website, they'll find linkages to all of our different channels. So developernetwork.com.au.
And I know that Rob still does a lot of in-person meetings and seminars in all major cities and capitals around Australia, majority of the time. So, follow him, reach out to any of those events that he does run. And he also does do the mentoring as well with the Property Developer Network. So, Rob, I'd love to, number one, thank you very much for coming on to the show. But more importantly, thank you for sharing all this valuable content for people that are wanting to get started into the property development space. It's not simple, but it's also not hard. And with the right people, the right team, the right community around you, people like Rob and other professionals are there to give you a lot of guiding light, and hopefully that you can turn your property dreams into a property development dream. And I think that's probably one of the most important things I want to share with all of our listeners today. Rob, thank you very much. And we wish you all the best for the new financial year, FY26.
All good, mate. I can't wait to catch up again. See you, Jeremy.